In this video, I'll show you how to create a custom plugin. Under the front and plugins folder, you'll find a folder called template, which you can use as a starting point. So I'll create a new folder called test plugin, and I'll copy the content from the template folder. The first thing I have to do is to remove the ignore plugin file, otherwise the plugin will completely be ignored. So what the application does, it will then go through all these folders and load up the config.json file and initialize the plugin in the UI, and also during its runtime execute it. So the first thing is I'll rename this script file and I'll keep the same naming convention, test plugin. Now, in order for the application to load the script correctly, in the config.json, I specify the code name test plugin. This has to be the same as the folder name, and the next thing there is a CMD setting which executes the actual script. So in here I'll just replace the plugin folder and the script name, and I have the same one, so it's easy to replace. I will keep the plugin type as device scanner. This means that it will show up in the device scanners section in settings, and I'll choose a different prefix. This prefix has to be unique across all the plugins, so I'll call it test plg, tst plg. Now let's have a quick look at the script itself. This script has usually a variable plugin name. I'll use the unique prefix, which I've just picked, and this is just to have a clearer debug log. So if there are any debug outputs from this plugin, we know where this debug is coming from. So additionally, in this script, you're able to retrieve any of the settings. So in here, you just have to specify the code name of the setting. The script itself is pretty straightforward. There are two methods. So we have the main method, which is called by default, and within this method we are calling the getDeviceData, and within getDeviceData we are getting the device data, which is then mapped to the current scan table in NetAlertX. We have just some fake data here, and this data is then mapped to the main application. What's important here is this list we are returning, and then we are looping through this device data list and creating plugin objects. These plugin objects are then added via this addObject method, and this plugin object has always these properties. So primary, secondary ID, watch values 1 to 4, some extra, and a foreign key. The foreign key isn't yet utilized. Usually it's the MAC address, and watched 1 to 4 are values which the user can mark as watched and receive notifications based on these changes. In this case, we are mapping these values to the current scan table via the config.json file. So in config.json, we specify that the values coming from the script are mapped to the current scan database table, which is responsible to scan for scanning and discovering devices. Additionally, on top of this, we have then the column mapping. So in order for the application to know that the watched value 1 equals to the hostname, we have to specify it in the config.json file. So here we have already specified that we are mapping it to database table current scan, and then if you search for watched value 1, you'll see that the column or the value passed to watched 1 and gets mapped to the current name database column in the current scan database table, which means it's really easy to map to any database table via this functionality. So you can update any database table this way via a plugin. So additionally, you can then specify, or you have to specify the name, how it's displayed in the UI, within the plugins section in the UI. And then we have, of course, the settings. So within this JSON, you can specify settings which are then displayed in the UI. There are some default settings in this template. So examples for different types of settings. So for example, drop-downs. Here we have the run schedule, a simple text box example, and so on and so forth. And let's say that in our example plugin, we want to give the user the ability to specify how many devices are returned. So we'll utilize this pre-prepared sum setting, and we'll create a setting, an integer setting, which allows the user to specify the number of devices. There's already an integer type of setting specified here, run timeout, which is used to kill the given script if the script runs longer than the specified time, by default 30 seconds, but I'll just use it as a starting point for my custom setting. So I'll put it somewhere on the top of settings, so it's easier for me to find it. And let's say the default value is 1, so, and the name will be returned devices. This is the description. How many devices are returned by the plugin. In this case, we have to also change the function code name. So let's call it returned devices. I try to keep these names short so it doesn't break the UI too much. And here we just need to use the full setting name, which is prefixed with the plugin code name or unique prefix. So now sum setting has an integer value which you can use to break this loop. Let's create an index. So if index is bigger than this, let's break, and index this one. So this will make sure that the loop gets breaked based on the user specified setting. Of course, in a real plugin, you would specify some APIs to be called in the getDeviceData method. Right now we have only fake data, so the returned values are always the same. But here, usually you call some APIs to retrieve the devices and then map them into NetAlertX. You can check, of course, any of the existing plugins if you want to see how this could look like. So now we should be pretty much set, and let's have a look at the UI. So the first thing, we need to restart the application. You can do this via the terminal, or in my case, I will just use the restart server button here. This is executed every 1 minute, so this can take a few seconds for it to be refreshed. Okay, so the execution queue is empty. We can see that plugins are being loaded. Once the plugins are loaded, we can head to settings and see if the settings were identified and loaded. So let's go to settings. So the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that the plugin shows up here in loaded plugins. No, so let's refresh the cache. Okay. So now we have our test plugin in the list. So I'll just Control and select it. Now I'll save the setting. And after refresh, we should see our specified settings. Alright, so we can see it's loaded in here. Still there is some caching issue, so I'll just refresh it once more. And hopefully this did the trick. Yes, so you can see now we have display name here. We didn't update the plugin name, which is again specified in the config JSON. So here you would update this display name, and it would then be reflected in here at the top. But what's more important is all these other settings seem to be loaded just fine. There are some samples here, but what's more important is the return devices, which is set just to one. The plugin is disabled. We can enable it to be executed on the schedule if we wanted to, but for this example I'll just run it manually. So you can see I have an error here, break doesn't seem to work here. So let's do it a different way around. Oh yeah, because I have to place it somewhere else. Okay. Hopefully this makes now more sense. Let me try again. So settings. Let's execute this. And you can see we executed the test plugin here. So here we can see that we have two events logged from this plugin. Test plugin, new entries too. So let's have a look if those devices were also recognized. You can check this. So this isn't updated because it wasn't run as part of the regular schedules, but you can always check this under integrations plugins. Oh, and you can see now follows, so the name discovery is running, so it means now the application has picked up these new devices. So this will take a little bit. You can see notification plugins are executed. So those two fake devices have been picked up by the application. It's refreshed. Okay, display name. So you can see we have now these two fake devices which were loaded into the application, and if I'm not mistaken, yes, we have now 6 new devices, and these are the two fake devices which were loaded from our plugin. So this is how you create a new plugin from scratch. So looking forward if you create your custom plugin in the future.